Good morning and welcome to the Daily Tanya. Today is Thursday, the second day of Teves, the 8th day of Hanukkah. It's called Zeis Hanukkah. And the last day of Hanukkah, our sages tell us, is a very, very special day. It is good to seize that day. Up until sunset, you have a prayer, as it says, one of the tzaddikim, the Ruzhin, the tzaddik, says that what the greatest tzaddik can accomplish on the prayer on Yom Kippur, a simple Jew can accomplish on this day, Zeis Chanukah, on the last day of Chanukah. Number 8 represents our essence of the soul that is beyond nature. 7 represents nature. 8 represents beyond nature. And it is the light of Chanukah, the light of Hashem, that illuminates our life and brings us brachas. And when we ask Hashem, we can ask and demand firmly that we need to have Mashiach. We need to have all of the problems gone. So today we begin chapter 6 in Tanya. Let's begin with tzedakah. Gedola, tzedakah shemekareves es hageula. Tzedakah brings Mashiach closer. So in chapter 6, the Alter Rebbe begins explaining the animal soul. As you remember in the first chapter, the Alter Rebbe explained that every Jew has two souls. We have the godly soul and the animal soul. He mentioned briefly the animal soul. The last few chapters he described what is the godly soul. And it is the essence of Hashem in us. It is the ways the godly soul functions in us and reveals itself in us. What is the faculties, the 10 faculties, the emotive faculties and the intellectual faculties. And then you have the garments of the soul, the way it expresses through thought, speech, and action. Says the Alter Rebbe that God created the world in a way there should be an equal playing field. Ze l'umad ze, one opposite the other. He creates holiness, and he has also, similarly, the forces of the other side of the holiness. Forces that are not good. The forces of evil. Now the question is, what is evil? Certain things we can definitely point out and say this is evil. If 2 days ago on New Year's Eve there was a terrorist took a pickup truck and killed 15 people in Texas, that is evil. But here the Alter Rebbe explains to us that there is the way Judaism looks at what is good, what is the opposite of good. There is the animal soul. Anything which is not godly is automatically already in the other side. If you want to connect to good, it is when we nullify our own desires and we give it up to Hashem. We allow Hashem inside us. They say one of the Hasidic Rebbes, I think it was the Kotzker Rebbe. They once went into the Beis Medrash, to the synagogue. The Hasidim was sitting and studying and praying, and he asked a question to the public. He asked them, Avi is God. Where is God? And people obviously were waiting to see what he says. And he answered, Avi melustamaran, wherever you let him in. If you let God in, that's where God is. So the Alter Rebbe explains here, is going to explain the struggle. Later on, he's going to talk about the struggle, but now he's going to explain, first of all, what is the animal soul? The other side. So let's see inside what the Alter Rebbe explains. The Almighty has created one thing opposite the other. If He created holiness, created the other side, unholiness. And by the way, the Alter Rebbe once said, when you see a very strong unholiness, that is a sign that there is also very strong holiness also. Continues the Alter Rebbe and says, "Ki kemoi shenefesh elikis klula me'esa spheres kedoshis umislabeshes b'shloisha levushim kedoshim." Just as the divine soul consists of 10 holy faculties, which correspond to the 10 supernal sephiros, and is clothed in 3 holy garments, the thought, speech, and action. What is holy garments? Thought, speech, and action of Torah. Thinking Torah, speaking Torah, doing Torah, all the mitzvahs, all the good things. So just like there is in the holy side, there's also on the other side, the side of not holy. Kacha nefesh de sitra acha. Meklipes noiga molobeshes bedam adam. So too the soul of the sitra acha, the other side. Later on, it explains what it is. So he calls it the other side. It doesn't describe what it is. It says what it's not. It's not the side of holiness, because the unholiness does not really have its own source, its own sustenance. It is the fact that it opposes godliness. So it says the same thing, that the soul of the other side derived from Kalipas Noiga. Kalipas Noiga is the shell, the husk that covers godliness, but it is a husk which is Noiga. It is able to be illuminated, it covers godliness, but is able to be transformed into godliness. And there is other Kalipas, other shells, which is totally evil. But we're not discussing it here now. So the klipa, that soul which is klipas nega, which clothed in man's blood, as we explained in chapter 1, that animal soul is clothed in the blood and thereby animates the body. So this soul too has what it calls klula me'esa kisrin de misavusa. It consists of 10 crowns of impurity. Meaning the 10 faculties of klipa are called crowns in Kabbalistic terminology. In the holy side, we said we have 10 powers of the soul, 3 intellectual and 7 emotive. The animal soul also has 10 powers, but he calls it 10 crowns. In Kabbalah, it calls it 10 crowns. Just like a crown represents something which is separated. Each crown, each kingdom has its crown. Something is in impure, and the impure side is all about selfishness, separation. So they also have, the other side has 10 crowns of impurities. Shem Sheva Midas Reis, these 10 faculties are 7 evil midot, 7 emotive traits. Which stem from the 4 evil elements mentioned above in chapter 1. We mentioned that there are the 4 elements, that the roots of the different negative traits, like element of fire is the root of the trait of arrogance, and so on. Element of water is the root of trait of lusts and things like that. So these are the 7. There's the 7 emotive attributes, the evil emotive attributes. V'seichel ha'meilidan. And there's the intellect, the seichel, which gives birth to these 7 evil midas, which is subdivided into 3, chachma, bina, and das, the wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And they are the source of the midas. So we find interestingly, the way the Alter Rebbe described the godly soul, if you remember, we spoke about that it starts with the intellect. And the intellect gives birth to midot, to emotions. So when you have an intellect and contemplating godliness and so on, you create godly emotions, pure emotions of love and fear of Hashem. Here the Alter Rebbe begins with the midas, with the emotive attributes. And it says that the seichel, the intellect, is the source of it. Why is that? Because, in other words, here the focus is first on the emotions, because that's what the animal soul is about. The animal soul is about selfish. What it feel it wants, what it desires for its own good. It's about emotions. It's about instincts. And then also it comes from the intellect. The intellect is as much as sort of justifying my emotions or planning how to get what I want. So that obviously you have to use the intellect. Continues the Alter Rebbe, because the intellectual faculties are described as the source of evil midas. Why? For the midas are commensurate with the quality of one's intellect. And he explains, the greater your intellect, the more mature you are, your desires is to different levels of desires that you have. A child desires and loves, expresses the midah of chesed towards petty things of little value. For his intellect is too immature and deficient to appreciate more valuable things. You can give a child a choice. Do you want $100 bill or do you want a candy? Tell it to a 2-year-old, of course he'll take the candy. He doesn't understand the greater things. The same thing obviously can go talk to small petty things in our life. By adults also there are many petty things. Similarly, with regard to the midah of Gevurah, he is angered and vexed by trivial things. And likewise with regard to boastfulness. The boastfulness expresses the attribute of tiferet, beauty, and the other midas. So it's all about how the intellect is developed, which leads to development of different emotive attributes. Continues the Alter Rebbe and says, these 10 attributes, the impure attributes, the selfish attributes, when you actually think, speak, or act on them, these are the 3 garments, just like we have the 3 holy garments. Here we have the 3 unholy garments. Now these 10 unclean categories, when a person thinks, thoughts originating from them, meaning when he thinks of ways obtaining something he desires, or speaks words originating from them, or does an act which serves or expresses them. Then the thoughts in his brain, the words in his mouth, and the power of actions in his hand and other organs, they are called impure garments for these 10 unclean categories. So your body becomes like a garment. Your body, your brain, your speech becomes a garment to these 10 impure elements of the evil. Which clothe themselves in these garments during the act, speech, or thoughts. Now, what are we talking about? Are we talking about acts of evil? Not necessarily. We're talking about anything which is not godly. These garments are of the animal soul, comprise all the deeds that are done under the sun, all mundane actions, which are all vanity and affliction of the spirit, as the Zohar Parshas B'Shalach says, interprets this a ruination of the spirit of holiness, breaking the spirit of holiness. Similarly, all words and all thoughts that are not directed to God and to His will and His service are all garments for the animal soul. שזהו פירוש לושן סטרא אחרא, פירוש צד אחר שאינו צד הקדושה. But this is the meaning of the term sitra achra, literally the other side, meaning the side, not the side of holiness. Thus, whatever does not belong to the realm of holiness is sitra achra, the other side. So what is holiness? So holiness is, as we said before, holiness is when you allow God in. Anything that syncs with God's will is holy. You can have a physical object. You look at the physical object, a phone, a table, a cup. You look at it. Do you see holiness? You don't see holiness. You see a physical thing. But you can have holiness. Take a mezuzah, a holy Torah book. It is still physical. It is a physical object. But when you look at it, you see holiness. It is a Torah. It is godliness. And the same thing is within ourselves. When we allow ourselves to become vessels to Hashem's light, vessels, and even if it's a temporary thing, you have a choice, you have an ability to do something, and then you break yourself and say, I give up my will to do the right thing. That is allowing Hashem in you. Continues the Alter Rebbe. בצד הקדושה, אינו יהיה לו השראה והמשכה מקדושתו של הקדוש ברוך הוא. The side of holiness is nothing but the indwelling and expression of God's holiness. ואין הקדוש ברוך הוא שיירה אלא על דבר שבוטל אצלו יזבח. Now God dwells only on that which is surrendered to Him. Now when we're saying surrendered to Him, it could be actually surrendered or it could be potentially surrendered. Actually surrendered is like angels. An angel does not have its own will, it's completely surrendered to God's will. Potentially surrendered is like every Jew that has the potential to be nullified to Hashem and carrying out Hashem's will in this world. Whether the surrender is an actual one and visible even in that surrendered being's external aspect, as is the case with the supernal angels, whose entire being is constantly and openly surrendered to God. Or it could be a potential surrender. בין בכוח, ככל איש ישראל למטה, שבכוחו לי יסבוטל ממש לגבי הקדוש ברוך הוא במסירות נפש על קדושת השם. Or whether it is a potential surrender, as is the case of every Jew here below in this physical world, who has the capacity for surrendering himself completely before God through martyrdom for the sanctification of God's name. And we spoke about this in the past. That the ability of every Jew to give up his life for Hashem is something unique that we don't find anywhere else. Although you find different nations, they commit suicide for whatever they believe, but this is because they believe in something. They were told, they were brainwashed, they were raised that this is it. But by Jewish people, we see throughout the history, people gave up their lives. Even not fanatic Jews, people who were not religious at all. Like I said, the example mentioned a number of times, Daniel Pearl, the New York Times journalist, was beheaded by Al-Qaeda, I believe it was. And last words he says, my father is a Jew, my mother is a Jew, and I'm Jewish. And he gave up his life for Hashem. And we found these stories throughout the history. So that is, of course, throughout the life. He didn't live a religious life. So you didn't see it in him, but potentially it was there all along. So that is a vessel for Hashem. Hashem is revealed. And that's why it says the Alter Rebbe, our sages tell us two things. It says if a Jew sits and studies Torah, God is studying along with him. In addition, it says that if 10 Jews are together in one room, the godliness is in them, even if they don't study Torah. That continues the Rebbe here. That is why our sages have said that even if one individual sits and engages in Torah study, the divine presence rests upon him. For when one engages in Torah study, his surrender to godliness emerges to affect him on a revealed external level. Why? Since such study entails setting aside one's own notions and presumptions in order to understand and accept God's wisdom. God's wisdom and will is expressed in the Torah. That's what we learned in last chapter. It is this surrender to godliness that causes the divine presence to rest upon the Torah student. But more than that, when 10 Jews are sitting together, the Shekhinah is there. Also, on each gathering of 10 Jews, the divine presence rests always. Together, 10 Jews form a congregation of Israel, which is a fit abode for the divine presence. So this is the end of today's shir. Obviously, the lesson that Hashem is in us, and that Hashem, where does Hashem dwell? When you let him in, create a vacuum inside you. Holiness, maybe that's why it's called holiness, like a hole. You create a hole in you. You allow the godliness inside. So this is the end. We'll see you B'ezrat Hashem tomorrow. Once again, happy Hanukkah. May Hashem help that this light of the Hanukkah candle should continue to shine for the whole year, and to shine until the coming of Mashiach very soon.